When Sergeant Emily Carter stepped off the transport bus at Camp Pendleton, the California sun glared down like judgment. The desert wind carried grit, heat, and the faint scent of gun oil. Around her, new recruits were shouting, laughing, and jostling for position, young faces eager to prove themselves, unaware that the real battles they'd fight were often invisible. Emily kept her head down. Her uniform was crisp, boots polished, but the thing no amount of discipline could hide were the scars. They crept up from the collar of her shirt, thick, twisted lines of silver and pale pink crawling across her neck, disappearing under her sleeve cuffs. For a moment, the noise of the base softened. A few recruits turned to look at her, then looked away too quickly. The whispers came a few minutes later, hushed, sharp, and cruel in the way only fear can sound. Look at her neck. What happened to her? Burns, I bet. Maybe she played hero and failed. Damn, she looks like a melted doll. Emily heard every word, but her face didn't flinch. She had heard worse. Much worse. A drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, barked orders for the new arrivals to form up. His voice was gravel, and authority rolled into one. You're not people here. You're recruits. You're clay. And I'm here to break and rebuild you. The recruits snapped into line, all except one. Mitchell's eyes found Emily instantly. You, the quiet one with the scars. You think you're special? No, Staff Sergeant, Emily replied evenly, her tone calm but steady. Mitchell stared at her for a long moment, something flickering in his gaze. Not pity, not disgust, but curiosity. We'll see about that, he muttered, then moved on. As the first week unfolded, Emily became an enigma. She wasn't the fastest runner, but she never stopped. She wasn't the strongest lifter, but she carried double loads when others faltered. And on the firing range, her aim was near perfect, not flashy, not hurried, just dead accurate. Still, whispers trailed her like shadows. During meals, she sat alone. Some recruits tried to talk, but most avoided her, unnerved by the way she never seemed to break. Carter's like a robot, one of them joked. Maybe the fire burned her nerves too. Laughter followed, and Emily didn't react. But inside, a storm brewed, one she refused to let anyone see. At night, when the lights dimmed and snores echoed through the barracks, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers traced the uneven skin along her arm, remembering the sound of crackling flames and screaming. The memory came in flashes, a door collapsing, a child crying, and a man's voice shouting her name. She turned on her side, forcing herself to breathe evenly. She'd promised herself she wouldn't remember. Not here, not now. The next morning, during endurance training, she outpaced everyone. The track blazed under the sun, and sweat poured down every face, but Emily's steps never faltered. The other recruits watched, irritated. She's trying to show off, trying to prove something. She's already weird enough. Look at those scars. But when one of them, Private Dawson, tried to trip her during a sprint, she didn't fall. Instead, she caught her balance mid-stride and crossed the finish line first. The instructor blew his whistle and barked, "Carter, you're an animal." She gave a short nod and fell back in line, heart pounding, not from exhaustion, but from something darker, the memory of fire licking her skin and the sound of someone yelling, "Get out, Emily. Get out." That night, she sat alone on her bunk, while others played cards or joked about weekend passes. She reached for the small tin box hidden beneath her mattress. Inside were a few things that didn't belong in Marine barracks. A half-melted firefighter badge, a faded photograph of a man in Marine blues, and a medal so scorched the engraving was unreadable. She turned the medal over in her palm. It had once belonged to her father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter, a decorated Marine who'd served 3 tours before joining the local fire department. The same fire department where she'd been a rookie firefighter the night everything changed. Emily's breath hitched as she remembered the explosion. The red-orange glow devouring her father's home. The screams. The unbearable heat. Her father pushing her away, shouting, "Save them, Em! Save them!" As she ran toward the room where 2 children were trapped. She'd carried them out, lungs choking on smoke, skin burning. Her father never made it out. When the news reached the corps, the Marines honored him as a hero. But no one talked about Emily, the girl who had survived the fire that killed one of their own. And she never told anyone, because survival wasn't glory. It was guilt. The next morning, she woke before dawn, lacing her boots tighter than necessary. Outside, the sky was still dark, the air cool. She started running laps alone, pushing her body until her scars ached. Sweat mixed with old burned tissue, stinging like fire again. She welcomed the pain. It was honest, clean, and predictable. By the time the others woke up, she was already back, face expressionless, uniform immaculate. During a marksmanship drill later that day, the recruits watched her fire round after round, every bullet hitting center mass. The instructor walked by and murmured, "Not bad, Carter." Not bad at all. One recruit snorted under his breath. Guess she's used to burning targets. Laughter rippled again. Emily didn't move, didn't blink. She reloaded calmly, aimed again, and fired. The bullet hit dead center, splitting the bullseye in half. Silence fell across the range. That night, even the jokes stopped. Still, the barracks wasn't kind. Someone slipped a burnt piece of paper into her locker with 3 words scrawled across it. "Still smell smoke?" Emily stared at it for a long time, then folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. She refused to let them win, because compared to the fire that had once consumed her world, their words were nothing but sparks. Later, as the camp slept, she went to the training field. The stars stretched wide over the desert, and the wind carried the scent of salt from the Pacific. She stood there quietly, thinking about her father's voice, about the moment she'd sworn she would never run from fire again. Her reflection appeared faintly in the dark window of the armory, the faint shimmer of her scars catching moonlight. She whispered softly, the words barely audible, "You're still here. That's enough." And in that fragile silence, something inside her steadied. She wasn't there to be liked. She wasn't there to fit in. She was there to prove that pain didn't define strength. It revealed it. The next morning, when the bugle called reveille, Emily Carter stood at attention with the rest. Her scars glowing faintly in the morning sun, like steel that had once been through fire and had come out stronger. What no one knew yet was that this quiet Marine, mocked for her scars, would soon force even the highest-ranking general to fall silent in awe, because her scars carried not shame, but a story of fire, courage, and survival the Corps would never forget. The California heat had turned merciless by the second week of training. Dust clung to the recruits' faces as they crawled beneath barbed wire and over gravel that bit into skin. Sergeant Emily Carter moved with precision, never wasting energy. Sweat beaded along the edges of her scars, tracing uneven paths across her neck. "Move it, Carter." A voice barked behind her. It was Private Dawson, the same recruit who had mocked her during sprints. "Don't let those burns slow you down." He laughed, loud enough for others to hear. Emily didn't respond. She finished the crawl, rose to her feet, and jogged to the next station as if the insult hadn't existed. But inside, her heart pounded with quiet fury. Not because she was angry at him, but because she remembered another time, another voice, shouting in panic as the world burned around her. The drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Mitchell, shouted at the squad to reset. "You're slower than old molasses." Again. The recruits groaned, but Emily was already dropping into position. By the third round, most of the others were panting, sprawled on the dirt. Emily remained steady, calm, her breathing even. Mitchell's whistle cut through the air. "Carter, what's your secret? Pain-proof?" She simply said, "No, Staff Sergeant. Just practiced." Her voice was level, distant, a tone that made Mitchell pause. For a second, he wondered what kind of practice could make someone that immune to pain. Then he barked another order and moved on. That evening, during rifle drills, Emily once again proved exceptional. Her bullets landed in tight groupings, one after another, punching through the paper targets like clockwork. The recruits watched, muttering among themselves. "Must have been a sniper before," one said. "Or a robot. Nah, she's too weird for that. Look at her face, creepy calm." Corporal Ryan Blake, who oversaw the range, stepped forward. He was younger than most corporals, with a sharp jawline and tired eyes that had already seen a deployment. "Carter," he called, "you're steady as a rock. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Emily lowered her rifle. "My father taught me, Corporal." He nodded. "Marine?" "Yes, sir." He gave a small smile. "Figures." But later that night, curiosity got the better of him. As recruits filed out of the mess hall, he joined her at the end of the line. "You don't talk much," he said quietly. Most people would have decked Dawson by now. Emily kept her eyes forward. "Fighting him won't change what he thinks." Ryan frowned. "So you're just going to let them walk all over you?" She glanced at him then, a brief, piercing look that froze him mid-step. "You don't understand," she said softly. "I already fought once. I won. That's enough." He didn't ask more. There was something in her tone, a weight, a shadow, that told him her war had happened long before the course. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The barracks were quiet, except for the steady hum of ceiling fans. She turned in her bunk, her body slick with sweat. Then came the dream again, always the same. Flames, screaming, a child crying behind a door. Her father shouting her name. The explosion. Emily gasped awake, chest tight, heart slamming against her ribs. She pressed her palm over her neck, feeling the ridged skin beneath her fingertips. It wasn't the heat she remembered most. It was the sound of things breaking. Wood, glass, promises. The next morning, exhaustion sat behind her eyes, but she didn't slow down. During weapons maintenance, she focused harder, her movements sharp and deliberate. A few recruits tried to strike up conversation, testing her, teasing her again. "Hey, Carter, what's with the scars? You cook yourself or something? Bet she's got more under that uniform." Maybe she fell asleep in the tanning bed. Laughter broke out, loud and mean. Emily's hands tightened around her rifle. For a moment, her vision blurred, the laughter transforming into the sound of crackling flames. Her breathing grew shallow. She forced her hands to relax. "You done?" she said finally, her voice quiet but razor-edged. The laughter stopped. There was something in her tone that made even Dawson look away. Later that day, she sat at the edge of the training field, polishing her rifle in silence. Corporal Ryan approached again. "You shouldn't let them get to you," he said. "They don't," Emily replied. "Doesn't look that way." She glanced up, eyes steady. "They don't know what real pain is." Ryan sat beside her, uncertain whether to push further. "You ever going to tell me what happened to you?" Emily smiled faintly, but it wasn't a warm smile. "No, Corporal. Some fires don't go out. They just change shape." He didn't understand what she meant, but something about the way she said it sent a chill down his spine. That night, when the lights went out, Emily found a small object taped to her locker. A blackened plastic doll, its hair melted, face disfigured, with a tag that read, "Hero of the Flames." Laughter echoed faintly from the corner of the barracks. She didn't look to see who it was. Her hands trembled as she removed the doll and set it on the desk. For a moment, she stared at it, and the air seemed to tighten around her. She remembered the smell of smoke, the unbearable heat, the feeling of dragging a body through burning debris, the sound of her father shouting, "Go, Emily, go," before the roof caved in. Her vision blurred, but she refused to cry. She reached into her locker, pulled out the half-melted firefighter badge she always carried, and held it tightly. "You saved two," she whispered to herself. "That's all that matters." The next day, something shifted. During an obstacle course, when Dawson tried another prank, tripping her again as she climbed the wall, she didn't fall. She gripped the rope, swung upward, and vaulted over with a speed that stunned the onlookers. She hit the ground running and finished first. The drill instructor's whistle cut through the air. "Carter," he shouted. "That's how a Marine moves." This time, even Dawson didn't laugh. Later, in the showers, a few recruits whispered again, but their voices carried unease instead of cruelty. "She's different," one muttered. "Like nothing shakes her." "She creeps me out," another said. "You can't tell what she's thinking." They were half right. Emily had learned long ago that showing pain only invited more of it. The only way to survive was to bury the fire deep, to keep it burning quietly, enough to fuel her, never enough to consume her again. That night, she lay awake once more, staring at the ceiling. The doll was gone. She had thrown it into the training field fire pit, watching it melt into nothing. The wind outside howled faintly, carrying the scent of smoke from the nearby firing range. Emily closed her eyes and let the smell wash over her. To most, it meant danger. To her, it meant survival. When morning came, she rose before everyone else again. She looked out over the sunrise breaking across the base, golden light cutting through the desert haze, and took a slow breath. Her scars glowed faintly in the light, like embers that never died. She whispered quietly, "Let them mock. They don't know fire like I do." And somewhere deep inside, that buried flame, the one that had nearly killed her, flared back to life, steady and fierce. Emily Carter was no victim. She was the fire itself. The desert sun showed no mercy. By week 3 of training, the recruits were covered in sweat, bruises, and dust. Their faces were burned by the wind, but none carried marks as visible as Sergeant Emily Carter's scars. They glistened under the heat, twisting like silver rivers down her neck and arms, reminders of the inferno she had once escaped. That morning began with the confidence course, an obstacle marathon designed to break even the strongest spirits. Staff Sergeant Mitchell barked orders as recruits lined up at the first station. You fall, you fail. You quit, you start over. The Corps doesn't build cowards. Emily crouched beside Private Dawson and Corporal Ryan, waiting for the whistle. The moment it blew, she launched forward. Her movements were methodical, not fast, but efficient. She crawled through the dirt, vaulted barriers, swung across rope lines, her muscles burning yet steady. Halfway through, Dawson decided he'd had enough of being outdone. As Emily climbed a high wall, he reached up and yanked her boot. She slipped. The world tilted, sky, dirt, noise, before she crashed into the ground hard. Dust burst around her. Pain shot through her shoulder. Laughter erupted above. Guess fireproof doesn't mean unbreakable. Someone shouted. Emily lay still for a heartbeat, staring up at the endless blue sky. The air tasted like metal and humiliation. Then, slowly, she rolled over, pushed herself up, and started climbing again. Her hand bled. Her knee shook. But she didn't stop. She reached the top, pulled herself over, and jumped down the other side. When she finished the entire course, she didn't look at anyone. She simply stood in formation, breathing hard, her face unreadable. Staff Sergeant Mitchell paced in front of her, his voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Carter, you took a fall and still finished first. Why didn't you report the interference?" "Because it doesn't matter, Staff Sergeant," she replied evenly. Mitchell studied her for a long moment. "Pain matters, Sergeant. It's the only teacher that doesn't lie." Emily met his eyes. "With respect, sir, I already graduated from that class." The squad snickered, but Mitchell's stare silenced them instantly. Later, in the mess hall, the mocking whispers started again, quieter this time, but still there. "She thinks she's special," someone muttered. "Doesn't even feel pain." Emily ignored it. She always did. But that night, when she removed her jacket, she saw the fresh scrape on her arm, red and raw against her older scars. For a second, she just stared. Then she cleaned it carefully and wrapped it herself. The physical pain didn't bother her. It was the laughter that echoed long after lights out that scraped against her nerves like sandpaper. Around midnight, she sat on the edge of her bunk, her hands clasped tightly. The barracks were quiet, except for the soft hum of air conditioning. She reached under her pillow and pulled out a small, burned dog tag, her father's. She ran her thumb over the engraved letters. Staff SGT, Daniel Carter. A voice from memory whispered through her mind, her father's deep and steady tone. "Courage isn't not getting burned, Em. It's walking back through the flames anyway." She closed her eyes. "I'm trying, Dad," she whispered. The next day began with rifle drills, but Emily's shoulder ached badly from the fall. She didn't complain. During the third round, she noticed her aim slipping. The instructor called it out. "Carter, you're off today." "You tired?" "No, Staff Sergeant." "Then tighten it up." She adjusted her stance, steadied her breathing, and fired again, dead center. The instructor grinned. "There's the Marine, I know." But when she turned, she saw Dawson smirking at her, lips curling around another insult. Something inside her cracked. At chow time, Dawson made another joke, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful with the soup, Carter. Wouldn't want another accident." The table erupted in laughter. Emily set her tray down quietly, her eyes fixed on him. "You think scars make someone weak?" she said calmly. Dawson froze, caught off guard by her tone. "They mean I got out of something that would have killed you," she said softly. "That's all." The laughter died instantly. She picked up her tray and walked out, leaving silence in her wake. Later that day, she was summoned to Command Sergeant Major Turner's office. Turner was an older Marine, calm, composed, with gray hair and eyes like steel. He gestured for her to sit. "Sergeant Carter," he began, "you've been here a few weeks. Your record is spotless. But your peers seem divided about you." "Yes, sir," she replied evenly. "Some say you're one of the toughest recruits they've seen. Others say you're impossible to read. Which one's true?" Emily hesitated, then said, "Both, maybe." Turner leaned back in his chair. "You don't talk about your past much, do you?" "No, sir." He studied her quietly. "Pain leaves marks, Carter. Sometimes the ones people can't see are worse than the ones they can." Her eyes flickered. "With respect, sir, my marks are enough reminder." Turner nodded slowly. "Fair. But remember, this isn't just about proving you can survive. It's about proving you can lead. The Corps needs both." She saluted and left, her chest tight. The words stuck in her mind long after she returned to the barracks. That night, The recruits were told to prepare for a dawn endurance test, a 10-mile hike with full packs. The kind of test that separated soldiers from pretenders. When morning came, the squad moved like shadows through the desert, the horizon still dark. Emily kept a steady pace, her pack heavy, her breath measured. The pain in her shoulders screamed with every step. Around mile 7, the group began to splinter. Some slowed down, some stumbled. Dawson tripped, falling hard into the dirt. Emily reached him first. He looked up, expecting mockery. Instead, she offered her hand. "Get up," she said simply. He hesitated. "Now," she added firmly. He took her hand. She pulled him up, adjusted his pack, and kept walking without another word. By the time they reached the finish line, only 5 recruits were still moving, Emily among them. Staff Sergeant Mitchell stood waiting, stopwatch in hand. "Carter," he called. "You just set the top endurance record of the week." The recruits stared at her, stunned. Even Dawson said nothing. Emily gave a nod, expression neutral, but her chest rose with quiet pride. That night, as the camp lights dimmed, she sat outside alone, watching the distant glow of the training fires. The smell of smoke drifted faintly through the air. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, the memory of fire didn't hurt. It simply burned quietly, steady, controlled, alive. She took out her father's dog tag and pressed it against her palm. "I didn't break," she whispered. "Not this time." The desert wind answered with silence. But inside her, the flame that had been buried for years flickered stronger, not of pain, but purpose. Because tomorrow, the tests would get harder, the challenges sharper, the mocking louder. But Emily Carter had already survived her breaking point once before, and she would do it again. The Mojave Desert stretched endlessly under the unforgiving sun, sand shifting with each step like it was alive. Sergeant Emily Carter adjusted the straps of her pack, feeling the familiar burn of her shoulder scrape from last week's obstacle course. Sweat ran down her neck, mingling with the scars she had long stopped noticing. "Listen up," barked Staff Sergeant Mitchell. The recruits snapped to attention. "Today is live fire simulation day. Treat every obstacle as combat. One mistake and you fail. Move smart, move fast, and survive." Emily scanned the field, stacked barriers, smoke generators, and a maze of sand dunes and obstacles designed to simulate chaos in combat. She took a deep breath. Chaos had always been her element, and yet this test wasn't just about endurance. It was about instinct. The whistle blew, and the squad surged forward. Emily moved through the obstacles like a shadow, calculated yet fluid. She vaulted walls, crawled under wires, and navigated the smoke with practiced ease. Around her, others stumbled, tripped, and fell, the desert sand burning their hands and knees. Halfway through, a distant rumble drew Emily's attention. A training Humvee, loaded with weight and dummies to simulate casualties, toppled over on an incline and ignited, flames licking at the fuel containers strapped inside. A roar of panic echoed from the recruits. "Stay back," yelled Mitchell. "It's not real. Don't get close." Emily froze for a split second, assessing the danger. The smoke was thick, heat radiating like a wall. And then she saw it, 2 dummies in the cab, representing trapped Marines. Her body reacted before her mind did. She sprinted toward the vehicle. "Carter, get back!" Someone shouted. But she didn't stop. She threw herself against the door, prying it open, despite the heat blistering her skin. She grabbed the first dummy, dragging it out and rolling it away from the flames. Smoke filled her lungs, her throat burned, but she ignored it. She went back for the second, her hands blistering as she maneuvered it free. The squad watched in stunned silence. Dawson's mouth hung open. Corporal Ryan's eyes were wide. Even Mitchell paused mid-command, whistle forgotten. Finally, Emily rolled the second dummy to safety. She staggered back, chest heaving, sweat and soot streaking her face and arms. Her uniform was scorched at the edges, and the heat had singed the hair at her neck. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't need approval. A helicopter drone hovered overhead, broadcasting the exercise to the observers in the command tower. One man leaned forward, gripping the railing, General Marcus Harlan, battle-worn and quiet, watching Emily with an intensity that unsettled even the experienced instructors. "Who's that Marine?" he asked, voice low but carrying authority. Mitchell swallowed. "That's Sergeant Carter, sir. Just remarkable, sir." The general nodded slowly, eyes never leaving Emily. He had seen many Marines in his decades of service. But something about this young woman, the precision, the calm under fire, the refusal to hesitate, drew his attention. After the exercise, Emily sat quietly while medics checked for burns. Her arms and neck were raw in places, some skin already peeling from the scorching heat. She flinched only slightly, accepting the bandages without complaint. "Why didn't you stop?" Mitchell asked quietly as he helped her to a bench. Emily shrugged. "Because hesitation costs less, even in practice." Later that evening, Emily cleaned her gear under the fading sunlight. The desert sky burned gold, then deep crimson. The other recruits avoided her gaze. Even Dawson, who had mocked her countless times, couldn't meet her eyes. The story of her calm heroism in front of the Humvee had spread quickly. Some whispered, "She's fireproof." Others muttered, "She's unstoppable." Emily didn't respond to any of it. She knew the truth. The flames had not tested her strength. They had only revealed it. Meanwhile, General Harlan requested a full briefing on her file. He leaned back in his chair, scrutinizing the sparse information in front of him. "I want her record opened fully," he said. "She isn't just another recruit. There's history here I need to see." The following morning, Emily led a smaller squad through night navigation exercises. Her actions were precise, calm, and efficient. But there was a tension that hadn't existed before. The other recruits glanced at her, uneasy, unsure whether to admire her or fear her. Ryan approached her quietly. "Carter, why didn't anyone know you were this good?" he asked. Emily kept walking. "Most people don't realize what they can do until they have no choice." "Fire teaches that." Ryan hesitated. "Fire?" She gave him a small, distant smile. The kind that leaves scars. Some visible, some invisible. As they continued, Emily's thoughts drifted to the past, the fire that had taken her father and almost claimed her life. She remembered the heat, the screams, the moment she carried 2 children to safety, while everything around her collapsed. She had survived, yes, but she had also learned the hardest lesson of all. Courage was not heroic when witnessed by strangers. It was survival when no one was watching. By midday, the general arrived in person at the training field. Observers watched as he approached Emily quietly. The other recruits noticed the sudden stillness, the kind of silence that only comes from awe or fear. Harlan's eyes rested on her scars for a long moment. "Sergeant Carter," he said finally, voice low but commanding, "meet me in my office after training." Emily nodded. She didn't flinch. She had been called to higher-ranking officers before, but the way he looked at her made her stomach twist. Not with fear, but with recognition. That night, Emily lay in her bunk, thinking of the Humvee incident. She replayed it endlessly in her mind, every second precise and vivid. She had acted without hesitation, saved lives in simulation, and now the attention of a general was upon her. It was strange, unfamiliar. She was used to being overlooked, mocked, or feared. But this attention, quiet, heavy, and discerning, unsettled her. She had never wanted recognition. Not for herself. Only for the truth her scars represented. She had survived the fire. She had saved lives. She had honored her father's legacy. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, Emily felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Not for herself, not for glory, but for the chance to finally stand before someone who might understand what she had endured. Because tomorrow, everything would change. The general's office awaited. The next chapter of her story, one that would make even the hardened Marines around her fall silent, was about to begin. The office of General Marcus Harlan was vast, quiet, and imposing. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with military histories and records, each a silent witness to battles fought and lives lost. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and leather. Emily Carter entered, her posture straight, eyes calm, her scars visible against the crisp uniform. She saluted sharply. "Sergeant Carter," General Harlan said, his voice measured. "At ease." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Emily obeyed, but kept her hands folded neatly, her mind alert. "I saw your actions during the Humvee incident yesterday," Harlan began, leaning forward. "Quick thinking, courage under fire. That kind of initiative. It's rare in recruits." Emily inclined her head. "Thank you, sir. I've trained for moments like that." The general's eyes lingered on the silver lines of her scars. There was no mockery, no pity. Only recognition, a silent question hidden in his gaze. "Tell me about these," he said quietly, indicating the marks on her neck and forearms. Emily hesitated, not because she didn't want to speak, but because the truth was heavier than words. Finally, she replied, "They are from a fire, sir. An explosion years ago. I survived. Others did not." Harlan nodded slowly, making notes in a file folder. "Your record mentions heroism, but details are limited. I want everything. Full history." A staff officer handed over a sealed file, stamped and marked confidential. Emily's heart tightened as the general opened it, spreading photographs and reports across the desk. The first photo made her catch her breath. Herself, years younger, carrying a small child in her arms, through a doorway engulfed in flames. Another photo showed her carrying a second child. Her hair was singed, uniform melted to her skin, face streaked with soot and blood. The photos were raw, devastating, undeniable. General Harlan studied them closely. "You were a firefighter before enlisting?" Emily nodded. "I trained as a civilian firefighter after my father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter, died. That night, I saved 2 children, but lost him and others in the explosion." Harlan's gaze held hers. "You saved lives while losing your own family. And you carried on?" "Yes, sir," she said softly. "It's not the lives lost I remember. It's the lives I could save. That's what keeps me going." The general leaned back, silent for a moment. Then he spoke, quieter than before, almost to himself. "Most people can't survive that fire, and you ran into it twice. Once for them, and once for yourself." Emily said nothing. She had trained herself to remain composed. The memories of the fire, the smoke, the screams of her father and neighbors, still burned inside her like embers. But she had long learned to channel that pain into focus, into strength. Harlan flipped through more pages, commendations, reports from the fire department, testimonials from the children she saved. He looked at Emily with something between awe and respect. "You've done more than endure," he said. "You've led in the shadows. And now the Corps sees you in action. It's remarkable." Emily shifted slightly in her seat. I never sought recognition, sir. Only to serve and to honor him. Harlan. One of his aides called. The officer review is ready. The general waved him away. His eyes remained on Emily. Sergeant Carter, your past has forged you. But your present? Your actions yesterday demonstrate leadership under extreme pressure. That's rare in Marines, rarer still in recruits. I need to know. Do you understand the weight of what you've done? Emily's voice was steady. Yes, sir. I understand the responsibility that comes with action. And I am ready for whatever comes next. The general nodded. He rose, pacing the office slowly. You've carried more than most Marines ever will. And yet, here you are, continuing to push yourself, to lead, to inspire others. I've seen your scars, Sergeant Carter. I've seen your courage. And I can tell you, the Corps will be silent no longer. They will recognize what you are. Not just for the fire you survived, but for the life you've built afterward. Emily felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever said words like that to her before. Most had whispered, mocked, or avoided her. Even the recruits who had witnessed her skills avoided eye contact, uncomfortable in the presence of her quiet authority. Sir, she said softly, I don't need recognition, but thank you for understanding. Harlan's gaze softened, a rare moment of vulnerability breaking through the stern exterior. You deserve respect, he said simply. Not pity, not scorn, respect, and that's what you will get from me and this course. The general paused, then pointed to the photographs of the children. Tell me their story. Emily drew a deep breath. She described the fire in vivid detail. The night the gas line exploded, the way flames roared through her father's home, the chaos, the panic. She told him how she had carried 2 children through the inferno, ignoring the pain searing through her skin, how she had watched neighbors perish, how she had barely survived. Harlan listened in silence, absorbing every word. He asked only a few clarifying questions, but his attention never wavered. When she finished, the room was still, heavy with the weight of her story. Sergeant Carter, he said finally, voice steady, I have seen many Marines who think they are brave. Few have faced death so directly and carried on. Fewer still do it with grace under pressure. You are extraordinary. Emily blinked, unaccustomed to such praise. Thank you, sir. That means more than I can say. The general leaned back, staring at her scars once more. These marks you carry, they are not blemishes. They are medals. Proof of your courage, proof of your resilience. The Corps will recognize that. But remember, it is not the recognition that defines you. It is how you act when no one is watching. She nodded. She had acted when no one watched. And now someone powerful did. Prepare yourself, Harlan continued. Your example will soon be shared with the unit. The Marines who mocked you will see not what they assumed, but what is real. And that truth will speak louder than any words I could say. Emily stood, saluted, and turned to leave. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear. From relief. From validation. From the quiet knowledge that her scars, her survival, and her courage would finally be recognized. As she walked back to the barracks, she passed Dawson and a few others from her squad. Their eyes met hers, hesitant, unsure. She didn't speak. She simply held their gaze, steady and unflinching. The unspoken message was clear. She had faced fire, death, and loss, and they had not. That evening, as she sat quietly polishing her rifle, Ryan approached her. So, I hear the general wants to see your file, he said cautiously. Emily looked at him, expression neutral. Yes, he needs to understand. What happened matters. Ryan nodded. You saved lives. And no one mocked that. Not anymore. Emily didn't smile. Not yet. But for the first time, she felt the faint warmth of acceptance from someone she hadn't expected, someone who understood the weight of her scars. As the desert sun set, casting long shadows across the camp, Emily Carter looked out over the training field. The flames she had survived years ago had shaped her, forged her into something stronger, something unbreakable. Tomorrow, the Corps would see her courage. The Marines who had mocked her would see it. And the general, silent, commanding, observant, had already seen it. For Emily, the real test was not in fire or battle drills. It was in the quiet acknowledgement that her scars, once a source of shame and pain, were proof of survival, strength, and unyielding courage. And for the first time in a long while, she felt ready. The morning sun cut through the early fog, painting Camp Pendleton in shades of gold and amber. The air carried the faint scent of gunpowder and sand, sharp against Emily Carter's senses. Today, something was different. The murmurs among the recruits weren't mocking, but hesitant, uncertain. Whispers of her heroism had spread. No one could ignore them. As Emily lined up for morning formation, she felt eyes on her from every corner. Private Dawson shifted nervously behind her, muttering under his breath. For the first time, Emily didn't flinch. She straightened her back, chest forward, and held her gaze straight ahead. Staff Sergeant Mitchell walked past the line, his boots clicking on the concrete. "Today's exercise is an advanced combat scenario," he barked. "Live ammunition, smoke, obstacle navigation. And remember, Marines, don't underestimate your teammate." Emily glanced at Dawson. His smirk had vanished. A flicker of unease passed over his face. The scenario began. Smoke generators filled the training field with thick, suffocating gray. Explosions echoed as blanks were fired, and the recruits moved as if in real combat. Emily's squad was in formation, crawling under barbed wire, advancing behind makeshift cover. A loud shout broke the tension. Simulated casualties. 2 recruits went down, one screaming in feigned panic, the other frozen in shock. The instructor yelled, "Medics, simulate casualties. Get them out." Emily didn't hesitate. She ran toward the injured, hoisting one over her shoulder with ease. The other she guided by hand, leading them toward safety. Her movements were calm, precise, almost mechanical in their efficiency, yet fluid and human in their compassion. From the observation tower, General Marcus Harlan's eyes narrowed. He had instructed his staff to watch her closely. And now, he observed her decisively save the day, not for glory, but because instinct demanded it. Among the recruits, whispers grew louder. Dawson's voice cracked, hesitant. She's incredible." Ryan, standing nearby, nodded, barely audible. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Emily completed the scenario, returning her squad safely to base. Dust and sweat coated her uniform, her scars glinting in the sun like silver rivers, visible, undeniable, beautiful in their testament. She stood in formation as Mitchell approached, expression unreadable. "Carter," he said finally, voice lower than usual. "You've not just survived the fire, you've become a leader. Your actions today, they speak louder than any drill, any instruction. The Corps will hear your story." Even Dawson said nothing. He avoided her gaze entirely, an unspoken acknowledgement of her strength. That afternoon, Emily received a summons to the command tower. She stepped inside, eyes calm, posture unyielding. The general was waiting, flanked by senior officers and training staff. "Sergeant Carter," Harlan said, motioning for her to stand at ease. "I have reviewed your file, observed your performance, and spoken to the staff. Today, your actions during the live fire scenario have cemented what I already know. You are extraordinary." Emily remained silent, nodding respectfully. The general continued. Some Marines mocked your scars. Some whispered about your past. But let me make this clear. Your scars are not a weakness. They are a symbol of courage, resilience, and the spirit of survival. They show what you've endured and the strength you carry every day. Emily's throat tightened. Few people had ever described her scars in such a way. Even those who praised her bravery had never seen the history behind the lines etched across her skin. Today, Harlan said, the Corps recognizes your heroism. You will lead training exercises, mentor younger recruits, and your story will serve as a lesson, not of tragedy, but of triumph. As he spoke, the assembled officers and recruits began to shift. Dawson's shoulders stiffened. The other recruits avoided glances, some in awe, some in guilt. The power of the moment settled over everyone like a tangible weight. Emily finally spoke. Sir, thank you. I only wish to honor those who didn't survive, and my father. That's all. Harlan nodded slowly. Then honor them you shall. Your story will be shared. Your scars will speak for the lives lost and the courage that remains. Outside the command tower, Emily walked back to the barracks. The sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the sand. She passed the recruits she had trained with, those who had mocked her, and felt the shift in their demeanor. Their whispers were gone. Instead, there was a quiet reverence, hesitant admiration, and unspoken respect. Dawson finally met her gaze. There was no smirk, no insult, just acknowledgement. He nodded slightly. Emily nodded back, accepting it. It was enough. Back in her bunk, she carefully laid out her gear, inspecting each piece as she had always done. Ryan approached her quietly. They're all talking about you now, he said softly. No one dares mock you anymore. You changed how they see everything. Emily looked up at him, expression calm. I didn't change them. I only did what had to be done. Ryan shook his head. Whatever it was, it worked. You earned respect. Real respect. Not just for what you can do, but for who you are. For the first time, Emily allowed herself a faint smile. She had spent years hiding from judgment, from pity, from misunderstanding. But now, her scars, once the source of ridicule, were a testament to everything she had endured, survived, and overcome. The next day, she led her squad through advanced exercises with renewed authority. Her instructions were precise, her movements confident, her calm under pressure a lesson in itself. Recruits followed her not because they feared her, but because they trusted her. They knew she had walked through fire, literally and metaphorically, and survived. That night, Emily sat outside on the training field, the desert wind carrying the scent of smoke and sand. The stars stretched across the sky, vast and endless, a silent witness to the courage that had burned through her life. She touched the scars on her arms and neck, her fingers tracing the ridged paths. They were no longer marks of shame, no longer reminders of loss. They were proof of survival, proof of courage, proof of enduring spirit. In the distance, she heard the faint voices of recruits, speaking quietly. Perhaps they were recalling the stories of her heroism. Perhaps they were reconsidering their own judgments. Emily didn't care. She had already walked through fire. They were only beginning to understand it. The wind shifted, and Emily closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of recognition without fear, without expectation. She had survived what most could not. She had saved lives. And now, the Marines who had mocked her, the Corps, the General, and her peers, finally saw her truth. Tomorrow, she knew, would bring new challenges. But for the first time, she felt ready, not just as a survivor, but as a leader, a Marine, and a symbol of resilience. Her scars gleamed faintly in the moonlight, silver against her skin, a testament to fire, courage, and unbroken spirit. And the Marines around her, who had once mocked her, would never forget the story etched into those scars. The morning air was thick with tension as Emily Carter prepared for the general's inspection. Word had spread quickly. General Marcus Harlan himself would walk the training grounds, observing recruits, drill instructors, and officers. Rumors whispered through the barracks that he was a man who didn't give praise lightly, and certainly didn't tolerate incompetence or mockery. Emily's scars gleamed faintly under the harsh sunlight as she adjusted her uniform, straightened her posture, and inspected her rifle. Every movement was precise, every breath steady. She was calm. She had faced fire before, endured chaos, and survived ridicule. Today, nothing would shake her. The squad assembled in formation on the training field. Dawson and the others shifted nervously, casting uneasy glances at Emily. Unlike before, their whispers carried uncertainty instead of mockery. The knowledge of her past and the general's attention had changed everything. The helicopter landed, stirring a cloud of dust. General Harlan emerged, crisp uniform reflecting the sun, expression unreadable. His eyes swept the formation slowly, appraising each recruit. Finally, they landed on Emily. She held his gaze, unflinching. Mitchell cleared his throat. "Sir, Sergeant Carter has performed exceptionally during live-fire scenarios and endurance exercises. Her peers respect her skills, though they've been slow to admit it." The general's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Emily. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he walked the length of the formation, observing every movement, every stance, every subtle gesture. Emily's heart remained steady. She had nothing to prove, but she would not falter under scrutiny. Harlan stopped directly in front of her, his gaze lingering on her scars. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and commanding. Then he spoke, quietly but with authority. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice carrying across the field, "walk me through your routine." Emily began, demonstrating weapon handling, movements, and tactical positioning with flawless precision. Her peers watched, silent and awed, as she executed each drill effortlessly. Every step, every motion, was controlled yet fluid, honed from years of survival and training. Dawson's jaw tightened. He had mocked her once, laughed at her scars, doubted her strength. But now, he saw something undeniable. Her courage and competence were unmatched. When Emily finished, she saluted sharply. "Complete, sir." Harlan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, decisively. "You understand tactics, leadership, and composure. But tell me, do you understand the weight of influence? The power of example?" Emily met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir. I've learned that leadership is not about rank or recognition, but about action under pressure, and the courage to guide others even when fear is present." The general's eyes softened slightly. "Your scars. They tell a story. Many would hide them, cover them, or pretend they don't exist. You carry them openly, yet they never hinder you. Why?" Emily's voice was calm but firm. "Because they are proof. Proof of survival, proof of responsibility, proof that courage is not an abstract word, but a living action. I carry them to remind myself, and others, that resilience is stronger than fear." A quiet murmur ran through the squad. Even Mitchell looked momentarily taken aback. For the first time, the weight of her experiences was visible to everyone, not as trauma, but as strength. The general nodded. "Well said. Now, Sergeant Carter, demonstrate a scenario." Emily led the squad through a live-action simulation, clearing buildings, navigating obstacles, providing cover, and coordinating movements under pressure. Every recruit followed her lead, moving with precision and trust. She issued commands, adjusted positions, and protected simulated casualties with the calm authority of someone who had faced far greater dangers than any training exercise. By the time the exercise concluded, even the most skeptical recruits were silent, their respect unspoken but undeniable. Dawson, standing off to the side, swallowed hard. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that mockery could never diminish true courage. General Harlan approached Emily once more. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice low but carrying weight, "you've done more than demonstrate skill. You've reminded this unit what courage looks like. Your scars, your actions, your history, they speak louder than any drill, any instruction, any reprimand." Emily saluted. "Thank you, sir. I serve to honor those who can't, and to guide those who can." Harlan's eyes scanned the squad. "And let this be a lesson to everyone present. Respect isn't given lightly. It's earned. And Sergeant Carter has earned it, silently, persistently, unwaveringly. Let that truth be remembered." For the first time since the general's arrival, the squad exhaled. Whispers of awe replaced whispers of mockery. Dawson's lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded toward Emily, a silent gesture of acknowledgement and newfound respect. Emily remained composed, but inside, a quiet pride stirred. She had survived ridicule, endured relentless training, faced fire, literal and figurative, and emerged stronger. Her scars, once a source of shame in the eyes of others, now carried meaning. They were testaments to courage, survival, and resilience. The general, seeing her calm acceptance of both recognition and responsibility, gave a final nod. "Sergeant Carter, your leadership will now serve as a standard for this unit. Your story, your actions, and your integrity will teach what no textbook ever could." Emily saluted again. "Understood, sir. I will not fail." As Harlan departed, the recruits stood in formation, glancing at Emily with quiet awe. Their previous mockery was gone, replaced by a profound, unspoken respect. Some still struggled to find words, but their eyes conveyed what words could not. She had earned their admiration through courage and action, not arrogance or words. Later, in the barracks, Ryan approached her quietly. "They're all talking about it," he said softly. "No one mocks you anymore. No one doubts you. You changed the whole atmosphere." Emily looked at him, expression calm but firm. "I didn't change anyone, Corporal. I only lived honestly. The rest, they had to adjust." Ryan shook his head, smiling faintly. "Adjust? They're inspired. All of them." Emily let out a soft exhale, finally allowing herself a small, private smile. The weight of years of ridicule and judgment was lifting, replaced with acknowledgement. Quiet, respectful, but genuine. That evening, she walked to the training field alone. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the sand. She traced her scars with her fingers, feeling the ridges, the heat, and the history embedded in them. No longer symbols of ridicule, they were proof of resilience, courage, and survival. And now, the corps, from the youngest recruit to the highest-ranking general, had seen that truth. Emily Carter stood alone in the desert light, a figure of quiet power, strength, and unwavering courage. The fire she had survived had forged her into something unbreakable, not just a Marine, but an example, a symbol, a leader. And the silent respect she now commanded was worth more than any award, medal, or praise she had ever received. For in the eyes of those who had once mocked her, Emily's scars told a story they would never forget. Weeks had passed since General Harlan's inspection. The desert heat had not softened, nor had the relentless pace of training, but a quiet change had settled over the barracks. Emily Carter moved through her days with the same discipline and precision, yet the atmosphere around her had shifted. Her peers no longer whispered mockery or doubts. Instead, glances of respect followed her, subtle nods of acknowledgement replacing laughter and ridicule. Even Dawson, once the loudest in scorn, now avoided mocking her. Occasionally, he lingered behind her, silently observing, learning from her every movement. Emily didn't seek attention. She simply moved with the calm authority that had earned her respect from the general and her peers alike. One morning, Staff Sergeant Mitchell called Emily to lead a mentorship exercise. The drill was simple in concept, but designed to teach recruits to trust, follow, and execute complex maneuvers. Emily's squad, her peers and former mockers, gathered, nervous yet attentive. "Today, Sergeant Carter," Mitchell barked, "you will train these Marines to coordinate in combat simulation. Show them how to lead and how to trust their teammate." Emily nodded and walked to the center of the field. Her posture was calm but commanding. She began giving instructions, precise, clear, and deliberate. She demonstrated movements, taught positioning, and explained tactical reasoning with a clarity that drew attention from every corner of the exercise zone. The recruits followed her guidance. Mistakes happened, but Emily corrected them without anger, with patience and authority. Slowly, the hesitant movements transformed into fluid coordination. The squad was working as a unit, their trust in her evident. Dawson stumbled slightly during a maneuver. Without hesitation, Emily steadied him and whispered, "Focus, you've got this." Her voice was calm, but it carried reassurance and authority. Dawson blinked, a quiet nod acknowledging both her guidance and his own realization. He could rely on her. The exercise ended flawlessly. Mitchell, observing from the sidelines, nodded appreciatively. "Good work, Carter. You've turned them into a team." Emily nodded quietly. Leadership had always been about action, not words. But seeing the squad respond, trust each other, and function as a unit was a quiet victory she allowed herself to acknowledge. Later that evening, she received an unexpected message. General Harlan had requested her presence at the base's command ceremony. Curious and cautious, Emily prepared herself. She wasn't seeking recognition, yet she knew her actions had drawn attention from the highest-ranking officer on base. At the ceremony, the field was filled with Marines, officers, and training staff. The hum of anticipation was palpable. When General Harlan stepped forward, silence fell over the crowd. He scanned the assembled personnel, eyes lingering on Emily. "Today," he began, voice carrying authority and respect, "we honor courage, perseverance, and leadership. And there is one Marine here whose story embodies all three. Sergeant Emily Carter." Emily's heart skipped. She had faced fire, injury, and ridicule, but public recognition was not something she had ever desired. She stepped forward, keeping her gaze forward, uniform crisp, posture unyielding. The general continued. Sergeant Carter's actions during training exercises and her past heroism demonstrate what it means to endure, to lead, and to survive. Her scars are not marks of weakness, but proof of courage, resilience, and unyielding spirit. She has earned the respect of every recruit, every instructor, and the command itself. A hush fell over the crowd. Marines who had once whispered or mocked her now looked on with silent admiration. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had underestimated her strength. Harlan gestured toward Emily. "Sergeant Carter, step forward." She did, quietly, maintaining composure. The general approached, placing a medal and certificate on the table beside her. It was an acknowledgement not just of skill, but of courage, character, and inspiration. "Sergeant Carter," he said, voice low but deliberate, "your story is a reminder to all of us. Scars tell a story. They do not define weakness. They define strength, survival, and the capacity to rise above adversity." Emily accepted the recognition with a nod, her expression calm, but her heart swelling. For years, she had carried the weight of her past silently, enduring ridicule and doubt. Now, her courage, perseverance, and scars were publicly honored. The general continued, addressing the assembled Marines. Let Sergeant Carter's story serve as an example. Let her courage inspire every recruit who faces fear, pain, and doubt. Let her scars remind us that true bravery is not in avoiding hardship, but in walking through fire and emerging stronger. As the applause filled the air, Emily felt a warmth she had never experienced before. It wasn't pride or ego. It was the quiet, fulfilling knowledge that her past, her struggles, and her survival mattered. Not just to her, but to the Marines around her, and to the corps she served. After the ceremony, Emily returned to the barracks. The squad approached her, hesitant at first, then more openly. Dawson stepped forward. Carter. I didn't realize, he said, voice low. I was wrong. You've earned every bit of this. Emily met his eyes, expression calm. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But thank you. Ryan smiled. You've changed everything here. Not just the exercises, but how we think about courage. About scars. About survival. Emily nodded. And let it be remembered, the rest doesn't matter. That night, Emily sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at her reflection in the window. The scars on her neck and arms shimmered faintly in the moonlight, no longer marks of shame or fear. They were testaments to survival, courage, and leadership. She traced them lightly with her fingertips, memories of fire, pain, and perseverance flooding back. Each scar told a story of loss, heroism, and resilience. They were proof that she had endured the unendurable and come out stronger. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the barracks. The quiet carried the faint hum of the Marines settling in for the night. Emily realized finally that the respect she had earned, silent, powerful, and unwavering, was lasting. It wasn't about medals, recognition, or praise. It was about the knowledge that her scars, her survival, and her courage could inspire others. She reached under her pillow and touched the dog tag of her father, Staff Sergeant Daniel Carter. His name felt heavier than ever before, not with grief, but with pride. She whispered softly, I did it, Dad. I survived. And I'll make it count. The next morning, Emily led her squad once more, her actions a living lesson in courage and precision. Every step, every command, every decision carried the weight of her experience. The Marines around her moved with trust and respect, silent acknowledgement in their eyes. Years from now, recruits would tell the story of Sergeant Emily Carter, the Marine who walked through fire, carried her scars with quiet strength, and commanded respect through courage, resilience, and unwavering leadership. And in the quiet of the desert, beneath the endless sky, Emily Carter's legacy burned brighter than any fire she had endured, a legacy of survival, honor, and silent respect that would never fade. Her scars, once mocked, had become her greatest testimony, and the Marines who had once laughed at her could only stand silent and in awe.